Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about the topic which is structure and function of chloroplast. Structure and function of chloroplast. So it is one of the main organelle which is found in the plant cell, and due to this organelle the plant is able to produce food by the help of the process which is called photosynthesis. So now we are going to study the structure and functions of chloroplast. So for that, first of all, we have to draw the structure of chloroplast, which is like this way. The chloroplast is the organelle which is double membraned. So this is the double membraned organelle in which we have the liquid which is present inside this organelle, and this liquid, like for the other cells, the liquid within the cell is known as the cytoplasm, but for the chloroplast this liquid is the stroma. So we call this as stroma, and these are the two membranes. Like this one is the outer membrane and this one is the inner membrane. Then we have the sacs that are present inside this, and they are joined together by a membrane which is known as the lamellae. So inside the chloroplast there is another network of membranes that is present, and that is known as the lamella. So this is known as lamella, and these sacs, they are the, like this one sac is actually a thylakoid. And there are the droplets that are also present within this chloroplast, and they are known as the lipid droplet. And again, we have the ribosomes that are also present within this chloroplast. Ribosomes, and there are the granules that are present in this chloroplast, and they are named as the starch granules. And this stack of thylakoid is known as granum. So this was the structure of chloroplast. So this is the structure of chloroplast, and they are only present in some of type of plants. Like they are not present in all of the types, but they are present in some types of plant cell. And they are present in the plant cells that are mainly in palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll tissues. Okay, so these chloroplasts, they are present in palisade mesophyll and spongy mesophyll tissues. So basically these mesophyll tissues, they are present in the leaf in the leaf, like with if we observe the structure of leaf, within that the mesophils are present. So these chloroplasts are present within that palisade mesophyll or spongy mesophyll tissues. And each cell may contain many chloroplasts within them. And for each chloroplast it is surrounded by an envelope of two membranes. So the outer one is called the outer membrane and the inner one is called the inner membrane. And for inside the chloroplast we have a watery material that makes up this chloroplast, and this is known as stroma. Like for the other cells we call that watery liquid as cytoplasm, but for chloroplast we call this watery liquid as stroma. And there are so many enzymes that are present within this stroma. Like we have seen, or we know that for light independent stage we need the coenzyme, which is NADP. So this type of enzymes and coenzymes, they are actually present in the stroma of chloroplast, and they are used in the light independent stage of photosynthesis. And if we recall the structure of mitochondria, in that different matrices are present, like the matrix are present in the uh, mitochondria. So like the matrix of mitochondria, the stroma of chloroplast contains small ribosomes. So these small ribosomes, they are spread in that whole stroma. And these ribosomes, they are present along with the small circles of DNA. They are also present. And what is their function? Their function is to, the ribosomes that are present in this stroma, their function is to synthesize protein. And the stroma, it also contains the starch grains, and the function of these starch grains is that it will store some of the carbohydrates that are made. Okay, so they will actually store the carbohydrates, and they will store them in the insoluble form. So apart from these two membranes, there are other membranes that are present inside this chloroplast. So these membranes, they are called the lamellae. Like these membranes that are, you can say that they are joining the thylakoid sacs with each other. So these are the membranes that are also present in the chloroplast, and these membranes, they are termed as the lamella. So these membranes, they are arranged so they produce fluid filled sacs, and the membranes that form these sacs, they are known as the thylakoid membranes. Okay, these are the thylakoid membranes. And the spaces, like the empty space which is inside this sac, is known as the thylakoid spaces. And these thylakoid sacs, they are packed, or you can say that these thylakoids, they stacked up like a pile of coins or pancakes, and this stack or these stacks, they are called as grana. Okay, so like this one is the singular one, so that's why we called it granum, but when all of these are considered, then we call them as grana. So singular is the granum. So the membranes of this lamella and thylakoid, they hold carrier molecules that work as an electron transport chain in a very similar way to the membranes of the cristae in the mitochondria. So these lamella, they are embedded tightly, and the thylakoid membranes and like embed these embedded tightly in the lamella and thylakoid membranes are several different photosynthetic pigments, like photosynthetic different photosynthetic pigments. They are also present on these thylakoids or on the lamella, and these pigments, they are the color substances, and the function of these pigments is that they absorb energy from certain wavelengths of light. So most of the abundant pigment that is seen on these lamella or thylakoids is the chlorophyll. So the most important pigment is the chlorophyll, and this may be the chlorophyll. Like this is of two types, chlorophyll A and the chlorophyll B. So this is the most important pigment which is seen on these thylakoids or the lamellas. So the other pigments, they are also present, and they are like xanthophylls and the carotenes. And carotenes. Okay, and the pigment, like the main, if we recall about that what is pigment, then a pigment is the substance that absorb some wavelength of light and reflect others. Like it absorb some wavelength of light and it reflects the others. So the wavelengths that are not absorbed are reflected back. Like the wavelength which is not absorbed is reflected, and this reflected one is seen by our eyes. Okay, so the chlorophyll, it looks green. Chlorophyll looks green. Why it looks green? Just because the pigment is actually absorbing red light. Like the chlorophyll is the pigment that is absorbing red light, but it is reflecting green light, and that is the reason that it looks green. In the same way, we have the majority of the chlorophyll pigments in the form of chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. A So the chloroplasts and the cells that contain them and the leaves in which these pigments they are present, they look green just because they are actually absorbing the red wavelength of light and they are reflecting the green. That's why they seem to be green in color, and that's why we look most of the part of the plant as green. In the same way, we have the other pigments, like we have the carotene and xanthophylls. So this carotene actually absorbs the blue light. Okay, carotene absorbs blue light, chlorophyll absorbs red light. So this carotene absorbs blue light, and the absorption of the light which is absorbed by the substances or the pigments is considered as its absorption spectra, like the range of wavelength that is absorbed by these pigments. By pigments is termed as the absorption spectrum. And the pigments in the thylakoid membrane, they are arranged in clusters. They are called the photosystems. Okay, they are actually the cluster of pigments. And each photosystem made up of large number of pigment molecules, plus like it has the pigment molecules, plus it has the proteins as well. So the pigments that absorb energy from light and channel it into a reaction center, like actually the function of the pigments that are in these photosystem is that they absorb the energy from the light and then channel it to the reaction center. But the photosystems, they are actually divided into photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So the photosystem 1 is actually absorbing the light with wavelength of 700 nanometers, and photosystem 2 is actually absorbing the wavelength light of wavelength 680 nanometer. So the reaction centers of both photosystems 1 and 2 contains chlorophyll A. And all the other pigments, they are chlorophyll B, carotene and xanthophyll. They help to channel energy which is harvested from the light to these chlorophyll A molecules. Like the other pigments, the B1, the carotenes and the xanthophylls, they are giving the light energy to these chlorophyll A molecules, and it increases the energy levels of the electrons in the chlorophyll A. And in these high energy electrons, that like the electrons that are in now chlorophyll A, they are those high energy electrons that derive the steps that takes place in the light dependent stage of photosynthesis. So the high energy electrons that derive these steps that takes place in the light dependent stage of photosynthesis, they are these electrons that are came from the energy harvested by B, carotenes and xanthophylls. So this is all about from today's lecture. Thank you.